Good afternoon. Thank you everyone that's actually hung around for this. I expected sort of an empty room because we are, what, 20 to 5 now, like people have got trains, beers and everything else to go to. I'm going to talk to you about obviously who I am, because obviously I'm not a face that many of you recognise unless I've met you in a data centre somewhere over the years. Obviously who AutoTrader are for those of you who don't know what we do. Obviously the main point, what continuous delivery and continuation is from sort of a dev aspect, and then what that can do for your infrastructure. And there's probably some parts of what I'm going to talk to kind of feed in some of the other talks that have happened today. So I've been at AutoTrader now for 3.5 years as an operations engineer, so I'm not actually a network engineer, although when I was at M247 I worked along Sam, for those of you who he is, and taught me some vague bits of network and sort of saw some hope in me. The odd fact is my arm span is actually greater than my height, which is a bit of a rare one, and back in October I kind of came off my mountain bike and broke my wrist. So now onto AutoTrader, obviously with the largest new and used car marketplace in the UK, more visits than all of our competitors combined. 92% of UK consumers know who we are, and depending on what Theresa May says on the day of the week, about 3.8 billion on the stock exchange, with 450 to 480,000 cars on the site, with a further 75,000 vehicles in our non-car channels. So that's just to put it into perspective as to actually just how that looks against all our competitors. So some gratuitous office shots. So we've kind of went with one of them with the ski lodge theme. Got some nice little minis in London. We craned the cars into our Manchester office and actually took the windows out for that one. Nice little Audi Quattro. This is one of them from our Car Zone, our office in Dublin, and that's like their nice little customer experience lounge, I think it is they call it. So our product estate. Back in 2013-14 when I started, we were doing about 40 deployments a week. All these were deployed to live using some legacy Perl scripts and some sort of magic dark art wizardry on a server that was basically a snowflake. We had 75 applications in live. Most of them were sort of fairly old monoliths and things that it might work, it might not when you did the update. And 350 Go pipelines, Go being a continuous integration delivery software, so you can write your pipelines to go away, build the code, test it, deploy it to your environments, and we use that actually quite extensively. If you fast forward to this year, the year we've just completed, actually, we averaged 80 plus deployments a week. Some weeks we're actually doing 100 plus deployments. I think the record we've just done was 125 deployments in 1 week. All this is now triggered by our developers straight into live. So operations are pretty much taken out of the equation. We now just say, yes, you can deploy. We actually have a little blob in the office which says sort of yes, no, or ask. And when it's on ask, they've just got to come to us and say, are we all right to deploy? It's probably because our monitoring system's not happy with something. 9 times out of 10, it's not a problem. We're now up to 195 apps. Most of these are now, what were part of the monolith, have now all been split out into microservices. And we've now got nearly 2,500 Go pipelines. And yeah, Go struggles with this. That's a talk for a completely separate time. So if we put this into some graphs, yeah, the release volume year on year has grown substantially. FY17, as you can see, massive jump. A lot of this is down to our new private cloud platform, where we're now actually orchestrating servers from scratch as part of that deployment process, rather than just deploying old code on top of the existing, new code on top of the old code. And you would have thought that with this level of deployment rate that you'd have some issues with reliability, and that you'd actually see more problems. Actually, the more often you release, the better success rate you can get, because you're actually only introducing a number of small changes rather than what might be 20 or 30 stories at a time into your development. So we all know what waterfall is, and frankly, I'm not going to talk about it. So what is continuous integration and continuous delivery? Well, for one, it's not some form of dog in the back of a Land Rover. So continuous integration, it's all about having your code stored in a repository, whether this is Git or SVN. you'll commit this multiple times a day. You know, there's the tweet that goes around on occasion, which is please commit before exiting the building. You know, it's sort of you know, making sure that everyone else that's working in your team or on that particular application knows where you're up to. And then once you've committed, obviously you have some form of integration tool, whether that's Jenkins, Go, that will verify your build and make it for you, which also means you get a fast feedback loop of when you've broken the build. You can kind of go back and look at it and go, what have I done and broke it. You've got to have consistency though, and without that, you won't get the end result that you're after. It doesn't have to be consistent with every single aspect, but certainly things like OS and your package versions, they've got to be the same. But you know, your hardware, you've probably got different requirements in dev and QA. That's fine. You know, scale it to the size that you require. For continuous delivery, it is an extension of continuous integration. But at this point, you know, the massive emphasis is that actually things are deployed to live automatically. You know, yes, you're still going to do some QAing along the way, but what a lot of people do is test-driven development, where actually you write the test first and then actually write the code to match the test. And so as part of that, obviously, your pitting is then done automatically. You've still got your build and deployment processes being completely consistent now all the way from QA, dev, and into live. And again, your OS and packages are being consistent, but again, your hardware requirements can be different. You know, for us in live, you know, we've got stuff that is on physical hardware, but in dev and QA it's on VMs. That's fine. But if you're going to have big inconsistencies, just bear that in mind that, you know, your results may or may not be as expected in the different environments. So if we look at that into some stages, so obviously with your traditional waterfall, you get your planning and your coding. With continuous integration, you then get that all packaged up nicely and tested. And then with your continuous deployment or continuous delivery, that's then released and deployed, you know, all the way through. And with DevOps, I'm going to go there with it for one, you get it operated as well, and that involves, you know, looking after it, making sure it's running, cleaning up after it at the end of the day. But I shouldn't have to say this, but DevOps is not a tool, it's not a team, it's, you know, it's not automation, it's a way of working, and there's many parts that go to making that up. So if we move on to talking about our infrastructure, quick hands, show of hands, anyone use Git, SVN or anything for backing their configs up currently? All right, so a few of you. I'm sure there's probably some of you that still just copy it off and save it in a text file and keep it on a shared drive somewhere. So, not a lot really changes when it comes to this. It's your configuration that's now your code, rather than being you know, some Java or Golang or something like that. Obviously, you're going to make your changes by changing the code instead, and then hopefully you're going to do some testing on this in some form of different environment. So obviously this is it. We've got some rather random bit of startup, I think, from a config file, and then obviously I'm storing in Git. Does this work only for the cloud? In a word, no. It's just that networks are fashionably late to the party. But with this, you've just got to use the same principles and tools that sysadmins and developers have been using for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and have used them fairly successfully. And you do start to bring benefits like chat ops. What are your options to help you support this? You've got Napalm, which will give you a unified API which will work with most things, Cisco, Juniper, Palo Alto. It is a Python library, so it should be fairly easy to get up and running in quite a short space of time. You've also got OpenConfig, which in itself isn't an API or anything like that, but it's a set of sort of data standards. You know, a BGP session is a BGP session, whether that's on Juniper, Cisco, whatever. But it's all about how you model that data so that actually you can then start writing tools that will interact with this, regardless of what your underlying hardware vendor is. You've also got things like Terraform, which you know, are quite nice to do. Sort of software networks in clouds like AWS and what have you. We've recently started using this for a project to do some big data stuff, and it allows us to build, manage, and version that infrastructure And again, it's sort of partially object-orientated, so it makes it easy to reuse your code elements. You can just reference them and pull them in without having to do lots of copying and pasting. And obviously, it'll give you some execution plans. It'll tell you exactly what it's about to do before it does it. And obviously, we're all only human at the end of the day, and it will help you when you get those sort of oops moments. And certainly from our point of view as an ops team, people do like to go into the AWS console and fiddle and then wonder why things are broke. We can just rerun the pipeline and it'll then redeploy everything as it should be, and magically it'll all work again. So Chris, one of our network engineers, was helping on this this big data project. So I asked him for a quick quote on what he thought about using it, because obviously for a network team they've never really done anything in AWS, or certainly even with this sort of mindset of writing the code first and then hoping that Terraform will do exactly what you've asked it to do. So you have got some other tools available. A lot of things like Ansible and that will integrate with Napalm. And again, this is all stuff that sysadmins have been using for years, and probably most of you in this room have used in some way, shape or form for either personal stuff or stuff that's in the office, because I'm sure most of you have also got multiple hats at a time. And finally, a Python script is not going to steal your job. If anything, it'll make it more interesting and a lot easier. So this came from David Barrasso from Fastly, that was at SRECon last year. Very good recommended conference, by the way. I think it's either last week of August or first week of September this year in Dublin. And also there is a big disclaimer here that if you've actually followed anything I've said today and you loop your network or destroy it or something, I'm taking no responsibility. And if you end up shooting laser in Engineer I, well, don't know how you managed that one. So some references from David that did, say, SRECon. He goes into a lot more detail about some of these things that are available to you, and obviously where networks have come from and where they go. And Mark Crossfield, a colleague of mine at AutoTrader, talked about our sort of our journey on continuous integration back in 2014. So again, that's sort of where we've come from. And I have a feeling I'm vastly early. I am indeed. But questions?
Which leaves plenty of time for questions. Or are we galloping towards beer at a rate of knots? That's the question. Are there any questions? Neil?
I should have said, does Neil want to get his question out of the way first, before I said questions, really?
Hey, he's good, isn't he? He's learning this. Well, it's brilliant.
So my question is, on your production platform, is it container-based or is it still VM-based?
It's for the 95% of our stuff is all VM-based. In live, its default configuration will be 3 VMs, but some of the stuff can have 25 VMs. You know, some of the stuff is running on physical hardware, like some of the back-end search platform. But dev's typically a single server. QA will be 2 servers, just so that you can test that integration with the load balancer and make sure your application doesn't do something silly with sessions.
And I mean, I find that amazing, a website like yours still running like that, given the popularity of it. I'm a big car nut, so I'm always on there looking at things that I'd love to buy. But and do you see a need to move in that direction? So, to give an example, a big chunk of the stuff we're doing in BT, we just moved all to containers because it ain't going to scale any other way. And I would have thought your website was a hell of a lot busier than ours.
So the random factoid is, I think we're about 1.2, 1.3 gig 95th percentile. Oh. It's actually, a lot of it's handed off over CDN. It's all quite lightweight. This is why for the most part it is physical VMs, but you only need 3 for most things in live because it's all Java apps at the end of the day. So
yeah, okay, well, that makes more sense. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah.
There's a question from James there. Who's going to get the mic there first? It's Bob. Race of the mic carriers.
James Blessing, Jisk. Have you tried using something like Chaos Monkey to try and break your deployments and actually see whether you can actually have a better uptime by actually deliberately making it go wrong?
We haven't, but obviously you have been at NetMCR and so have seen my previous presentation on a network for enterprise. And so, as you know, we operate 2 data centers, both of them are active-active. So actually, if we have a problem in one, we can move, I think 99% of services now to run from our secondary data center, and that happens in under 5 minutes. So for the most part, customers don't notice. This is how and why we can release so often and so quickly, is we release to the passive data center, switch traffic, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, well, we can switch back again and put a new version in over the top and carry on.
Did that answer your question? Yeah. Are there any other questions? I've got one, maybe two actually. One of them is you're talking about the scalability of your Go pipelines. Can you expand on that? What was it, just sheer horsepower, or is it limitations in the code, or what?
It's a part of the problem. I don't want to throw ThoughtWorks under the bus on this one, but yeah, we've had some problems with sort of the version of Java we were running, and we've sort of scaled way past, I think, what they originally intended us to do. Because again, a lot of the stuff is looking at Git repository, so it's constantly polling for changes. It's then having to coordinate building those changes, deploying to dev QA. It's just, when you were making config changes, it's all an XML file. So whilst the XML file in actual physical size isn't very big, but obviously it's tens of thousands of lines long, and so we were getting contention when trying to save this file. So typically on just before lunch, everyone would be like, "Oh, I'm just going to update my pipeline, save," and then it would just grind to a halt and we'd have to restart the service. But if you're trying to do something on a Saturday afternoon, it would be absolutely lightning fast. So we have managed to overcome that with sort of some of their software updates and changing Java versions that it was running on.
So literally, it's just number of plates spinning at once.
Yeah,
really,
at some point we probably, because again, it doesn't cluster. So at some point we're probably going to have to come up with a solution of going, well, this will live on this one and everything else will live on this Go server, but at the minute it works.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Andy.
Maybe hello. I have some questions about the infrastructure part of this, which traditionally in the past, getting testing for the big tin has been very, very difficult because copies of the big tin have been very, very expensive, and therefore the more development and test environments you have, the more copies of some very, very expensive tin have to exist. But today, really interesting virtualized versions of the switch operating system or the router operating system or firewall operating system or whatever exist. And I wonder if you make good use of those, and if actually it causes you to pick one vendor over another because you can actually have their operating system as a VM in your test environment versus another which will only sell you on a bit of tin.
So at the minute, we have got sort of a 12-month project to start actually trying to implement some of what I've talked about. So hopefully it'll actually be one of our network guys that'll be stood here in 12 months' time telling you how well we fared, and hopefully it'll be a success. But yeah, at the minute, they say when I ask for show of hands, quite a lot of this is probably actually either somebody's pushing the config back out after they've made their change, or they've got something incoming and going, "Oh, I've seen you've logged in and you've made a change. Let me drag that config back off and go and store it for you." So again, it should help you in that actually if you've probably got like a junior network team or something that might be doing some first line analysis, and you say, "Oh, we need to make this routing change at 11 o'clock tonight," you can get them to write the code change, make a pull request, somebody can review that and say, "Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that." And then if you've got an ops team that's 24/7, you can just say to them, "Oh, 5 to 11, you just press the button, they'll push it out," and actually you then as a network engineer haven't got to be up claiming overtime and whatever else. And for the business, actually it saves money and should make life easier, because actually the change is going to work because at least 2 pair of eyes have looked at it, and you can then implement those sort of things. And obviously if you have catastrophic network failure or something, you can kind of go, right, well, we know exactly what the last config was, not, "Oh, we pulled this off a router about 3 weeks ago, can anyone remember what other changes we've made to it?" Because that's then the worst case scenario, because you then get a load of people going, "Our routes don't work anymore."
Are there any further questions for Simon before we let him go?
No, I'll just wait for the lynch mob now to chase me out.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much, Simon. Thanks for coming. Thanks for talking to us about that, and thanks for the questions.